Marcus Rivera never thought his quick reflexes would change his life forever. When 4 gunshots rang out in the parking garage beneath the federal building, he didn't think he just moved. The bullets were meant for District Attorney Sarah Chun, wife of Police Chief David Chen, but Marcus threw himself between the assassin and his target, taking all 4 rounds in his chest and shoulder. As he lay bleeding on the concrete, the last thing he saw was Sarah's terrified face before everything went black. 6 months later, she would walk into his hospital room with a proposition that would shake him to his core. What she offered wasn't just gratitude, it was something that would bind their fates together in ways neither of them could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of March 15th started like any other Tuesday for Marcus Rivera. At 28, he had been working private security for 3 years, a job that paid well enough to support his younger sister Elena through college and keep their small apartment in Queens. His military background made him valuable to high-profile clients who needed more than just a uniform standing in a corner. Marcus arrived at the federal building at 7:30 a.m., 40 minutes before District Attorney Sarah Chun was scheduled to arrive for her testimony in the Richardson corruption case. The case had been front-page news for months, a web of bribes, kickbacks, and political favors that reached into the highest levels of city government. Sarah had been the lead prosecutor, methodically building a case that promised to send 6 powerful men to prison. The threats had started 3 weeks earlier. Anonymous phone calls to her office, suspicious cars parked outside her home, and most recently, a dead rat left on her doorstep with a note that simply read, "Drop it." Her husband, Police Chief David Chen, had insisted on round-the-clock protection. But Sarah was stubborn. She refused to be intimidated and continued her work with the same fierce determination that had made her the youngest district attorney in the state's history. Marcus had worked with Sarah before on 2 previous cases. She was professional but warm, always remembering to ask about his family and genuinely listening to his answers. Unlike many of his wealthy clients who treated security personnel like furniture, Sarah made him feel seen. She brought him coffee during long days and always said please and thank you, small gestures that meant more than she probably realized. The federal building's parking garage was supposed to be secure. Card access only, security cameras, and regular patrols. But as Marcus learned that morning, money could buy access anywhere, even in the most protected places. Sarah's black sedan pulled into her reserved parking spot on level B2 at exactly 8:10. Marcus was positioned near the elevator bank, scanning the area as he always did. The garage was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic from the street. Above. Sarah stepped out of her car, carrying her leather briefcase and a coffee cup from the shop across from her apartment. She wore a navy blue suit that made her look both professional and formidable. Her long black hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she moved with the confident stride of someone who had never backed down from a fight. "Morning, Marcus," she called out as she approached the elevator. "Ready for another fun day in court?" "Always, Miss Chun," Marcus replied, pressing the elevator call button. "How are you holding up?" Sarah's expression grew serious for a moment. "David thinks I should request a postponement until they catch whoever's behind the threats. But we both know that if I show fear now, they win." The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. It was then that Marcus noticed something wrong. The sound came from behind them, a car door closing too softly, footsteps trying to be silent on concrete. His military training kicked in, and every muscle in his body tensed. "Get behind me," he said quietly, his hand moving instinctively toward his concealed weapon. Sarah started to turn around, but Marcus was already moving. The man emerged from behind a concrete pillar 30 feet away, wearing dark clothes and a ski mask. The gun in his hands was steady and professional. This wasn't some desperate amateur. Time slowed to a crawl. Marcus could see the assassin's finger tightening on the trigger, the muzzle flash that followed, and the trajectory of the bullets heading straight for Sarah's chest. Without conscious thought, Marcus threw himself sideways, using his body as a shield. The first bullet hit his right shoulder with tremendous force, spinning him around but not stopping his momentum. The second caught him in the chest, just below his left collarbone. The third and fourth bullets struck his torso as he completed his protective dive. Each impact feeling like being hit by a sledgehammer. Marcus crashed to the concrete floor, his vision already starting to blur from blood loss and shock. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear Sarah screaming and the sound of running feet. The assassin was fleeing, his mission incomplete. "Marcus! Oh God, Marcus, stay with me!" Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. She was on her knees beside him, her hands pressed against his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Her navy suit was already stained red. Marcus tried to speak but could only manage a weak cough. Blood filled his mouth, and he realized at least one of the bullets had punctured his lung. Sarah's face was the last thing he saw clearly, tears streaming down her cheeks, her phone pressed to her ear as she called for an ambulance, her free hand still applying pressure to his wounds. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital became a blur of bright lights, urgent voices, and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness as teams of doctors and nurses worked to save his life. He caught fragments of conversations. Massive blood loss. Collapsed lung. Immediately. The surgery took 6 hours. 2 bullets were removed from his chest cavity, 1 from his shoulder, and the 4th had to be left in place because removing it would risk paralysis. When Marcus finally woke up 3 days later, his body felt like it had been rebuilt from spare parts. Chief David Chen was sitting in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside his bed. A man in his early 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. David looked like he hadn't slept since the shooting. "You're awake," David said, leaning forward. "How do you feel?" Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was raw from the breathing tube. David handed him a cup of water with a straw. "Like I got hit by a truck," Marcus finally managed. "Sarah? She's fine. Not a scratch on her, thanks to you." David's voice was thick with emotion. "The doctors say you'll make a full recovery, but it's going to take time. Did you catch him?" David's jaw tightened. "We're working on it." The garage security cameras caught everything, but he knew exactly where the blind spots were. Professional job. "We think it's connected to the Richardson case, but we don't have proof yet." Over the following weeks, as Marcus slowly recovered, he learned more about what had happened. The assassination attempt had made national news. Sarah had testified via video link while surrounded by federal marshals, and her testimony had been devastating. 3 more defendants had agreed to plea deals rather than face trial. The flowers and cards started arriving on his second day awake. Some were from Sarah's office staff, others from police officers who knew Chief Chun, and many from complete strangers who had seen the story on the news. But the most surprising visitor was Sarah herself. She came every day during this first week awake, usually during her lunch break. She would sit in the uncomfortable chair and tell him about the case, about her work, about anything except the shooting itself. Marcus appreciated that she didn't treat him like a hero or make a big deal about what he had done. "You know," Sarah said during one of these visits, "David thinks you're some kind of superhero. He keeps telling everyone about your military record, your training, how you read the situation perfectly." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his hospital bed. "I just reacted. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Not anyone. You risked your life for mine without hesitation. That's not training, Marcus. That's character." As The days passed. Marcus began to notice something different in Sarah's visits. She seemed more relaxed around him, more willing to share personal details about her life. She told him about her childhood in San Francisco, her parents who had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but hope and determination. She talked about meeting David in law school, their courtship, their wedding 10 years ago. But she also mentioned things that suggested all was not well in her marriage. David worked 18-hour days, obsessed with his career and reputation. They rarely spent time together anymore, and when they did, they often fought about her taking risks with high-profile cases. "He wants me to transfer to family court," Sarah confided during one visit. "Says it would be safer, less stressful. But I didn't become a prosecutor to handle custody disputes. I want to make a difference." Marcus found himself looking forward to these conversations more than he wanted to admit. Sarah was brilliant, passionate, and completely dedicated to justice. She also had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. Despite his pain, the physical therapy was brutal. Marcus had to relearn basic movements, rebuild strength in his damaged shoulder, and work around the permanent limitations caused by his injuries. The bullet still lodged near his spine meant he would never be the same physically, but he was determined to regain as much function as possible. Elena visited every evening after her classes at NYU. His little sister had grown up a lot in the past month, taking charge of their finances and dealing with insurance companies while Marcus recovered. She was proud of him, she said, but also terrified that she had almost lost him. "You're all the family I have left," she said one evening, tears in her eyes. "Promise me you won't do anything that's stupid again." Marcus couldn't make that promise, and they both knew it. It wasn't in his nature to stand by when someone needed help, regardless of the personal cost. By his 6th week in the hospital, Marcus was walking short distances with a cane and regaining feeling in his right arm. Doctors were pleased with his progress and started talking about discharge dates. That's when Sarah's visits became less frequent. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At first, Marcus told himself she was just busy. The Richardson trial was entering its final phase, and she was working around the clock preparing closing arguments. But when 3 days passed without seeing her, he started to worry that something was wrong. Chief David Chun provided the answer during one of his visits. "Sarah's been getting more threats," he said grimly. "We think whoever hired the shooter isn't giving up. I've convinced her to stay at a safe house until the trial is over. Is she okay?" "Physically, yes. But this whole thing has shaken her more than she wants to admit. She blames herself for what happened to you." Marcus felt a stab of guilt. "She shouldn't. I made my choice." That's what I told her. But Sarah's always been stubborn about taking responsibility for everything around her. The day Marcus was finally discharged from the hospital, he expected to return to his old life. The security company had held his job, offering him desk work, until he was cleared for field duty. Elena had kept their apartment running smoothly, and his savings account was actually healthier than before, thanks to donations from well-wishers. But something fundamental had changed. The shooting had altered his perspective on risk, on purpose, on what really mattered in life. He found himself thinking about Sarah constantly, not just as a client he had protected, but as a woman who had shared her deepest thoughts with him during those hospital visits. 3 weeks after his discharge, the Richardson trial concluded, with guilty verdicts on all counts. The news coverage was extensive, with Sarah being hailed as a crusader for justice who had persevered despite attempts on her life. Marcus watched the coverage from his apartment, proud of her success but feeling strangely disconnected from it all. He returned to work on light duty, mostly reviewing security protocols and training new hires. His colleagues treated him with a mixture of respect and caution, as if his brush with death had made him somehow different. In a way, it had. The nightmares came sporadically but intensely. He would dream of the gunshots, the impact of the bullets, Sarah's terrified face. Sometimes he would wake up in a cold sweat, his chest aching where the scars had formed. The company. Doctor said this was normal, that trauma manifested in many ways. But Marcus felt like he was living in a strange limbo between his old life and whatever came next. 2 months after the trial ended, Marcus was finally cleared for full duty. His first assignment was a corporate event in Manhattan, boring but safe work that would ease him back into field operations. He was adjusting his tie in the bathroom mirror when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah Chun's number. They hadn't spoken since his discharge from the hospital. "Hello, Sarah." "Marcus." Her voice sounded different, more formal, almost nervous. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I was wondering if we could meet. There's something I need to discuss with you." "Of course." "When and where? Would tomorrow evening work?" "There's a coffee shop called The Grind on 42nd Street near the library." 7 o'clock? Marcus agreed, though something in her tone made him uneasy. This didn't sound like a social call to catch up on how he was doing. This sounded like business. He spent the rest of the day wondering what Sarah wanted to discuss. Perhaps she was facing new threats and needed security again. Or maybe she wanted to personally thank him now that some time had passed. But deep down, Marcus suspected it was something else entirely, something that would change everything between them. The next evening, Marcus arrived at the Grind 15 minutes early. The coffee shop was busy with the after-work crowd, full of people reading, working on laptops, and having quiet conversations. He chose a corner table where he could see the entrance and waited. Sarah walked in at exactly 7 o'clock, scanning the room until she spotted him. She wore a simple black dress and carried a small purse, no briefcase, no legal documents, nothing that suggested this was a professional meeting. As she approached his table, Marcus noticed something different in her expression. There was determination there, but also vulnerability. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from him. "Always," Marcus replied. "How have you been?" "Busy, adjusting." Sarah fidgeted with her purse strap. "The threats stopped after the convictions, but David insists I still need protection for high-profile cases." They ordered coffee and made small talk for several minutes, but Marcus could sense Sarah was working up to something important. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked directly into his eyes. "Marcus, what I'm about to tell you might shock you, but I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." Marcus set down his coffee cup, giving Sarah his full attention. The bustling sounds of the grind seemed to fade into background noise as he focused on her serious expression. "David and I are getting divorced," Sarah said quietly. "The papers were filed yesterday." This wasn't what Marcus had expected to hear. He remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "It's been coming for a long time," Sarah continued, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "The shooting just forced us to face what we'd been avoiding. We've grown into completely different people over the past few years." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Divorce is never easy. That's not why I asked you here, though." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "What I'm about to propose will sound crazy, and I need you to understand that I've thought about this very carefully." She slid the envelope across the table. Marcus looked at it, but didn't pick it up. "Inside that envelope is a marriage proposal," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "Not a romantic one, but a business arrangement that would benefit both of us in ways I think you'll find surprising." Marcus felt his world tilt slightly. "Sarah, please let me explain everything before you respond." Sarah leaned forward. "My divorce from David is going to be messy. He's fighting for half of everything, including the inheritance I received from my grandmother last year. It's substantial enough money to change your life and your sister's future completely. The coffee shop's ambient noise returned as Marcus tried to process what he was hearing. A waitress refilled their cups, and he used the interruption to gather his thoughts. "There's more," Sarah continued once they were alone again. "David has been spreading rumors in the legal community that I'm unstable, that the shooting affected my judgment. He's trying to damage my reputation professionally. A quick remarriage to someone respectable would counter that narrative." "And you think marrying your former bodyguard would help your reputation?" Marcus asked. "I think marrying the man who saved my life would send a very different message than David wants people to hear." Sarah's eyes were intense. "It would show that I'm moving forward, not backward. That I'm grateful, not traumatized." Marcus picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A marriage of convenience that lasts exactly 2 years. You would receive $5 million up front, plus all living expenses. Your sister's college tuition would be paid in full, along with graduate school if she chooses. You'd have access to the best medical care for your ongoing treatment." The numbers were staggering. Marcus had never imagined having that kind of money, never dreamed of the opportunities it could provide for Elena. "In exchange," Sarah continued, "you would accompany me to social functions as my husband. We would maintain separate bedrooms in a house I'm purchasing in Westchester. You would continue your security work if you choose, or explore other career options with the financial freedom to do so. And after 2 years, clean divorce, no complications. You keep the money, I keep my reputation intact, and we both move on with our lives." Marcus opened the envelope and found a detailed contract along with a personal letter in Sarah's handwriting. The legal language was precise, covering every aspect of their arrangement from financial obligations to public appearances to the terms of dissolution. "You've really thought this through," he said. "I've thought about little else since the trial ended." Sarah's vulnerability showed through her professional facade. "Marcus, you gave me my life back. Let me give you the resources to build whatever life you want." The personal letter was more revealing than the contract. Sarah wrote about her guilt over his injuries, her gratitude for his sacrifice, and her respect for his character. She also wrote about her loneliness in her marriage to David, how their relationship had become more about appearances than genuine connection. "I need to ask you something," Marcus said, looking up from the papers. "Is this really just about money and reputation? Or is there something else?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I won't lie to you. These past few months have shown me what's missing from my life. David and I stopped really seeing each other years ago. But in that hospital room, talking with you every day, I remembered what it felt like to connect with someone genuinely." "Sarah, I'm not asking you to love me, Marcus. I'm not even asking you to pretend to love me in private. I'm asking for partnership, for companionship, for the chance to build something real, even if it has a predetermined ending." Marcus folded the papers and slid them back into the envelope. "I need time to think about this." "Of course, take as long as you need." Sarah gathered her purse. "But Marcus, please don't dismiss this because it seems unconventional. Sometimes the most practical arrangements become the most meaningful ones." After Sarah left, Marcus sat alone in the coffee shop for another hour, turning her proposal over in his mind. The financial security was undeniable. $5 million would change everything for him and Elena, but the emotional implications were more complex. He walked home through Central Park, the evening air helping to clear his head. The city was beautiful at this time of day, full of people heading home from work or out for dinner. Marcus had always loved New York, but he'd never had the luxury of simply enjoying it. He was always working, always focused on the next paycheck, always worried about Elena's tuition payments. Elena was studying in the living room when he arrived home. At 22, she had grown into a poised young woman with their mother's gentle nature and their father's sharp intellect. She was majoring in international relations with plans to attend law school, though Marcus worried about how they would afford it. "How was work?" she asked without looking up from her textbook. "Interesting." Marcus sat down across from her. "Elena, hypothetically, what would you do if someone offered you everything you wanted, but with strings attached?" Elena finally looked up, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "That's pretty vague. What kind of strings?" "The kind that would change your life completely, but require you to give up certain freedoms for a specific period of time." "Are we talking about a job offer?" Marcus considered how to explain without revealing the details. "Something like that. An opportunity that would solve all our financial problems, but would require me to commit to something I've never considered before." Elena closed her textbook and gave him her full attention. "Marcus, you've sacrificed so much for me already. If this opportunity is good for you, really good for you, then I think you should consider it. What's the worst that could happen?" That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Sarah's offer. He remembered their conversations in the hospital, how easy it had been to talk with her, how much he had looked forward to her visits. He also thought about Elena's tuition bills, his medical expenses, and the uncertain future of his security career, given his physical limitations. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work and took the train to Westchester to see the house Sarah had mentioned. It was a beautiful colonial on 3 acres, with enough space for privacy, but close enough to the city for commuting. He could picture Elena visiting during college breaks, could imagine having a real home instead of their cramped apartment. He spent the afternoon researching Sarah's divorce proceedings, reading news articles about David's accusations and her legal challenges. It became clear that her reputation was indeed under attack, and that David was playing hardball in ways that seemed designed to destroy her professionally as well as personally. That evening, Marcus called Sarah. "I have some conditions," he said without preamble. "I'm listening. First, Elena needs to know the truth about our arrangement." "I won't lie to my sister." "Agreed." "Second, I want to continue working in some capacity. Not necessarily security, but something meaningful. I can't just be a kept man for 2 years." "That's actually perfect. I was hoping you might consider becoming my personal security consultant. You understand the threats I face better than anyone. Third, we need to establish clear boundaries about the physical aspects of this arrangement. I understand we'll need to appear affectionate in public, but I want to know exactly what that means." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Light physical contact for appearances, holding hands, brief kisses, that sort of thing. Nothing that makes either of us uncomfortable. And fourth, I want a clause that either of us can end the arrangement early. If it becomes untenable, with appropriate financial adjustments, I can agree to that with some modifications to protect both our interests." Marcus took a deep breath. "Then yes, Sarah, I accept your proposal." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. "Really?" Sarah's voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Really? When do we start?" The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah's lawyer revised the contract to include Marcus's conditions, and both parties signed the agreement in a private ceremony that felt more like a business merger than the beginning of a marriage. Elena took the news better than Marcus had expected. After the initial shock wore off, she became excited about the opportunities the arrangement would provide. She hugged Marcus tightly and whispered, "I hope you find some happiness in this too, not just security." The wedding itself was a small civil ceremony at City Hall, attended only by Elena and Sarah's assistant. Sarah wore a simple cream-colored dress, and Marcus bought his first expensive suit with money from the advance payment. The judge who performed the ceremony seemed bemused by their obvious nervousness, but pronounced them husband and wife with appropriate solemnity. Their first public appearance as a married couple was at a legal symposium where Sarah was the keynote speaker. Marcus felt awkward in his new role, unsure how much affection to display and when. But Sarah guided him with subtle cues, and they managed to present a convincing picture of a couple in love. The media attention was immediate and intense. Photos of the hero bodyguard and the crusading prosecutor appeared in newspapers and online gossip sites. The narrative was romantic and compelling. The man who had taken bullets for her had won her heart during his recovery. David Chun's reaction was swift and ugly. He gave an interview to a tabloid newspaper claiming that Sarah had been having an affair during their marriage, that her quick remarriage proved her instability. But the story backfired when other officials came forward to defend Sarah's character and professionalism. Moving into the Westchester house felt surreal. Marcus had his own wing of the house, complete with bedroom, office, and sitting area. Sarah's wing was on the opposite end, connected by common areas where they would spend time together for the sake of any household, staff, or visitors. Their daily routine quickly settled into a comfortable pattern. Sarah left early for work in the city, while Marcus spent his mornings developing security protocols for her various cases. Afternoons were often spent together, reviewing threats, planning public appearances, or simply talking about their days. It was during one of these afternoon conversations that Marcus realized how much he was beginning to enjoy Sarah's company. She was brilliant and funny, with a passion for justice that inspired him. She also had hidden depths. She could cook elaborate dinners when the mood struck her, played piano beautifully, and had read more books than anyone Marcus had ever met. "You know," Sarah said one evening as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset, "this arrangement is turning out to be more pleasant than I expected." "More pleasant?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm hurt. I thought I was at least moderately enjoyable company." Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that Marcus had come to treasure. "You're much more than moderately enjoyable. You're—" She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You're easy to be around. I don't have to perform or prove anything with you." "Is that what marriage to David was like? Performing?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "Everything with David was about image. How we looked to others, what our marriage said about his career prospects, whether I was being supportive enough of his ambitions. I forgot what it felt like to just be myself with someone." Marcus understood that feeling. He had spent years being responsible for Elena, for their survival, for maintaining the appearance that everything was under control. But here, in this house with Sarah, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before his parents died. Peace. First major test of their arrangement came 3 months into their marriage. Sarah received a high-profile case involving political corruption that would require extensive travel and public appearances. The threats resumed immediately, along with pressure from law enforcement to accept heavy protection. "I don't want federal marshals following me around," Sarah told Marcus over breakfast. "It sends the wrong message to juries and makes witnesses nervous. But I also can't ignore the reality of the risks." "Then let me do it," Marcus said. "I'm already your husband. Having me as your security detail won't look unusual. Your injuries are healed enough for me to do this job. And I know you better than any federal agent would. I can read your moods, anticipate your needs, blend into the background when necessary." Sarah studied his face carefully. "Are you sure? This case could last 6 months or more, and the travel schedule will be brutal." "I'm sure. Besides, it's what I'm trained for." The case took them to 12 different cities over 4 months. Marcus had worried that the constant travel in close quarters would strain their arrangement, but the opposite happened. Working together professionally strengthened their personal connection. Sarah was brilliant in court, methodically building her case against defendants who thought their wealth and connections made them untouchable. Marcus found himself genuinely proud of her accomplishments, not just professionally impressed. The threats intensified as the trial progressed. Anonymous letters, suspicious packages, and photographs of Sarah taken with telephoto lenses from impossible distances. Marcus coordinated with local law enforcement in each city, but he never let Sarah out of his sight during public appearances. One evening in Denver, after a particularly grueling day of testimony, Sarah collapsed into the hotel room chair looking exhausted. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said quietly. "Having you here, knowing you're watching out for me, it lets me focus completely on the work." Marcus was reviewing security arrangements for the next day, but something in her voice made him look up. Sarah was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Sarah, nothing. I'm just grateful." But her tone suggested there was more she wasn't saying. The trial concluded with another round of guilty verdicts, cementing Sarah's reputation as one of the most effective prosecutors in the country. The celebration dinner was attended by colleagues, law enforcement officials, and reporters, all praising Sarah's courage and skill. Marcus stood at the edge of the room, watching Sarah accept congratulations and pose for photos. She was radiant in her moment of triumph, and he felt a surge of something that surprised him with its intensity. Pride, certainly, but also something deeper and more personal. Elena joined them for the celebration, having flown in for the trials. Conclusion. She pulled Marcus aside during the party. "You love her," Elena said simply. Marcus started to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. "It's okay," Elena continued. "I can see it in the way you look at her, the way you two move around each other. The question is, does she love you back?" "It doesn't matter," Marcus said finally. "Our arrangement has an expiration date. Arrangements can change if both people want them to." That night, Marcus lay awake in his hotel room thinking about Elena's words. When had his feelings for Sarah shifted from professional respect to something deeper? When had their business arrangement start feeling like a real marriage? The flight back to New York gave him time to study Sarah without being obvious about it. She worked on legal briefs for most of the trip, occasionally asking for his input on security concerns for upcoming cases. Their conversation was easy and natural, filled with the kind of shorthand communication that develops between people who spend a lot of time together. But Marcus also noticed the way Sarah's hand would brush his when she handed him documents, how she would lean closer to him than strictly necessary when pointing out something in her notes. Were these gestures simply part of their public performance, or was there something more genuine behind them? Back in Westchester, their routine resumed, but something fundamental had shifted during their months on the road. The house felt more like a home they shared rather than a convenient arrangement. They cooked dinner together, watched movies in the living room, and fell into easy conversation about everything from current events to childhood memories. 1 year into their marriage, Marcus realized he was dreading the approaching end of their arrangement. The financial benefits had changed his and Elena's lives dramatically, but the emotional rewards had been unexpected and profound. For the first time since his parents' death, he felt like he was part of a real partnership. The problem was figuring out how Sarah felt about their evolving relationship. She was warm and affectionate with him, but always within the bounds they had established. He couldn't tell if her feelings had deepened the way his had, or if she was simply maintaining her end of their bargain with characteristic professionalism. The answer came in an unexpected way, during what should have been a routine evening. At home, Sarah received a phone call that changed everything and forced them both to confront what their marriage had become. The phone call came at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in October. Sarah had been reading case files in the living room while Marcus worked on his laptop nearby, their comfortable silence broken only by the occasional rustle of papers and the distant sound of autumn wind through the trees. Sarah's expression changed completely as she listened to the caller. Her face went pale, and she gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "When did this happen?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you certain it's connected?" Marcus closed his laptop and moved closer, his protective instincts immediately activated by the fear in Sarah's voice. "Yes, I understand. 24-hour protection starting immediately." Sarah ended the call and sat motionless for several seconds. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked gently. Detective Rebecca Walsh was murdered tonight. Shot 3 times outside her apartment building in Brooklyn. Sarah's voice was hollow with shock. She was the lead investigator on the Richardson case, the one who first brought the corruption evidence to my office. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Do they think it's connected? The FBI is treating it as such. Agent Morrison says they have reason to believe the people behind Richardson's network are eliminating anyone who was instrumental in the prosecution. Sarah looked directly at Marcus. I'm officially under federal protection as of right now. Within an hour, their peaceful home in Westchester was transformed into a command center. FBI agents swept the property, installed additional security equipment, and established perimeters around the house. Agent Jennifer Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, briefed them on the threat assessment. We believe you're dealing with a sophisticated criminal organization that has resources and patience, Morrison explained as they gathered around the dining room table. Detective Walsh's murder was professional, no witnesses, clean execution, the kind of work that costs serious money. What about Marcus? Sarah asked. If they're targeting people connected to the case, he could be at risk too. Morrison looked at Marcus with something approaching respect. Mr. Rivera, your actions during the original assassination attempt likely saved Miss Chun's life and disrupted their timeline. That makes you both a target and an asset. We'd like you to continue as Mrs. Chun's primary protection, but with federal backup. The next few weeks tested their relationship in ways Marcus hadn't anticipated. The house was no longer their private sanctuary, but a secure facility with agents monitoring their every movement. Sarah couldn't travel to court without a convoy, and Marcus found himself coordinating with federal agents who questioned his every security decision. The stress affected Sarah deeply. She became withdrawn and jumpy, startling at unexpected sounds and working even longer hours to distract herself from the constant threat. Their easy conversations became stilted, and the warmth that had developed between them cooled under the pressure. One morning, Marcus found Sarah in her office at 5 a.m., surrounded by case files and empty coffee cups. You need to get some sleep, he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. I can't stop thinking about Rebecca, Sarah replied without looking up. She had 2 young children, Marcus. They're orphans now because she helped me build a case against these monsters. That's not your fault, isn't it? Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion and tears. I chose to prosecute this case. I pushed forward despite the threats. Every person who gets hurt because of that choice is partly my responsibility. Marcus reached across the desk and gently took the pen from her hand. Sarah, look at me. She finally met his gaze, and he could see the guilt and fear eating away at her. Detective Walsh knew the risks when she brought you that evidence. She chose to do the right thing, just like you did. The only people responsible for her death are the ones who pulled the trigger. But if I had been more careful, if I had accepted federal protection from the beginning, then you might not have been as effective in court. Those convictions happened because you were able to work freely, to connect with witnesses and juries. Second-guessing those decisions now won't bring Rebecca back. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to live like this, Marcus. Always looking over my shoulder, never knowing if today will be the day they succeed. You don't have to carry this alone, Marcus said softly. That's why I'm here. Something shifted in Sarah's expression. Is that the only reason you're here? Our contract? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to address. Before he could respond, Agent Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom system. Mrs. Chun, we need you in the command center immediately. We've intercepted communications that suggest an imminent threat. The next 72 hours blurred together in a haze of heightened security measures and constant vigilance. Intelligence suggested that an attempt would be made during Sarah's court appearance on Friday, but the FBI couldn't determine the exact nature of the threat. Marcus insisted on accompanying, Sarah to court despite Morrison's objections. She functions better with familiar faces around her, he argued. And I know her patterns better than your agents do. The courthouse was locked down like a fortress. Snipers on rooftops, metal detectors at every entrance, and plainclothes agents scattered throughout the gallery. Sarah delivered her opening statements with characteristic precision, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she gripped the podium. The attack came not during the proceedings, but afterward, as they were leaving the courthouse through a supposedly secure underground garage. It was a replay of the original assassination attempt, but this time the attackers had studied Marcus's previous response. Two gunmen approached from different angles, forcing Marcus to choose which threat to address first. He pushed Sarah behind a concrete pillar and drew his weapon, but the attackers had positioned themselves to create an impossible tactical situation. Federal agents, drop your weapons. Morrison's team had anticipated the ambush and moved to intercept the assassins. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When the shooting stopped, both gunmen were dead and no one else had been injured. How did they know about the garage? Sarah asked as they sat in the FBI's mobile. Command unit afterward. Morrison's expression was grim. We're investigating the possibility of an information leak. Someone with access to our security plans gave them the layout. The revelation that their protection might be compromised sent Sarah into a spiral of paranoia and despair. She refused to leave the house for anything but absolutely essential court appearances, and even then, she seemed to expect each trip to be her last. Marcus watched the woman he had come to love disappear into a shell of fear and isolation. Their conversations became purely functional, focused on security arrangements and legal strategy. The warmth and connection they had built over the past year seemed to evaporate under the pressure. 3 weeks after the courthouse attack, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He found Sarah in her office late one evening, staring out the window at the darkened grounds around their house. We need to talk, he said, closing the door behind him. If this is about increasing security measures, it's not. Marcus sat down across from her. Sarah, I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe there's only one way to end this threat permanently. Sarah turned to face him, curiosity overriding her exhaustion. We need to draw them out into the open, Marcus continued. Create an irresistible target that forces them to make a move we can control. What kind of target? Me, specifically, us together in a vulnerable situation. If we can make them believe they have a perfect opportunity to eliminate both of us, they'll take it. And when they do, we'll be ready. Sarah stood up abruptly. Absolutely not. I won't use you as bait. You're not using me. I'm volunteering. It's the only way to end this, Sarah. As long as these people are out there, you'll never have a normal life. You'll never be safe. I'd rather live in fear than watch you die trying to protect me again. The emotion in her voice surprised them. Both. Sarah turned away, but not before Marcus saw tears in her eyes. Sarah. He stood and moved behind her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Look at me. She shook her head, but he turned her around anyway. Her face was streaked with tears she'd been holding back for weeks. I can't lose you, she whispered. I know this was supposed to be temporary, just a business arrangement, but Marcus, I love you too, he said softly. The admission hung between them, transforming their relationship in an instant. All the careful boundaries they had maintained, all the professional distance they had preserved, disappeared with those 4 words. Sarah kissed him then, desperately and without reservation. It was their first real kiss, not performed for cameras or observers, but born from genuine emotion and fear of loss. I don't want our marriage to end in 8 months, Sarah said, when they finally broke apart. I want this to be real. It already is real, Marcus replied. It has been for a long time. They spent that night talking about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes for a future together. Sarah admitted that she had fallen in love with him gradually, starting with their hospital conversations and deepening during their months of travel and shared experiences. "I was terrified to tell you," she confessed as they lay together in her bed for the first time. "I thought you might feel obligated to reciprocate because of our contract." "The contract was just paper," Marcus said. "What we have now goes far beyond any legal document." But their newfound happiness was overshadowed by the reality of their situation. The people hunting Sarah wouldn't stop just because she and Marcus had finally acknowledged their love for each other. The next morning, Marcus presented his plan to Agent Morrison. "We leak information that Sarah and I will be attending a private charity function next weekend. Small venue, limited security, the kind of event that would be impossible to resist. And then what? We hope they don't succeed in killing you both. We control every aspect of the environment. We know they're coming. We choose the battlefield, and we end this once and for all." Morrison was skeptical, but after consulting with her superiors, she agreed to the operation. The charity event would be real, but most of the attendees would be undercover agents. Sarah and Marcus would wear bulletproof vests and have backup positioned throughout the venue. The week leading up to the event was tense but strangely peaceful. Knowing that they loved each other had changed the dynamic between Sarah and Marcus completely. They were no longer housemates maintaining a professional arrangement, but partners facing danger together. "Whatever happens at this event," Sarah said the night before, "I want you to know that this year with you has been the happiest of my life." "It's not ending," Marcus replied firmly. "We're going to get through this, and then we're going to have 50 more years together." The charity function was held at a small museum in Manhattan, elegant but intimate. Sarah looked stunning in a black evening gown, and Marcus wore a tuxedo that concealed his body armor and weapon. To any observer, they appeared to be a happy couple enjoying a night out. The attack came during the cocktail hour, just as Morrison had predicted. 2 men entered through the kitchen, having eliminated the security guards stationed there. But this time, the FBI was ready. Marcus saw the gunmen first and moved to shield Sarah, but he didn't have to face them alone. Federal agents emerged from their positions throughout the room, surrounding the attackers before they could fire a shot. The firefight was brief and decisive. Both assassins were killed, but not before one of them revealed under interrogation that they were part of a larger network with connections to several prominent politicians and business leaders. The arrests that followed over the next few days dismantled the entire conspiracy. 12 people were indicted on charges ranging from murder to racketeering, effectively ending the threat against Sarah and anyone else connected to the original Richardson case. 3 months later, Marcus and Sarah stood in the same courthouse where they had first been married, this time renewing their vows in a ceremony that reflected their genuine love rather than a business arrangement. Elena served as Sarah's maid of honor, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her brother marry the woman who had given him a new life in every sense of the word. "I never thought a marriage proposal could be a business document," Marcus said during his vows, drawing laughter from their friends and family. But Sarah turned a contract into something beautiful and real. Sarah's vows were equally heartfelt. "You saved my life twice, Marcus, once from bullets and once from loneliness. I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am for both." As they kissed at the altar, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. A split-second decision to throw himself between Sarah and an assassin's bullets had led to a love story neither of them could have imagined. The original contract had specified a 2-year arrangement, but their new marriage certificate had no expiration date. They were partners now in every sense of the word, bound not by financial agreements, but by genuine love and mutual respect. Agent Morrison attended the reception, raising a toast to the most unusual protective detail I've ever supervised. Chief David Chen was notably absent, having moved to another city after his divorce was finalized. His attempts to damage Sarah's reputation had backfired completely, and his own career had suffered as a result. Elena gave a speech that brought the entire wedding party to tears. "My brother has always protected the people he loves," she said. "But Sarah, you're the first person who protected him back. Thank you for seeing the man we all knew was there." As the evening wound down, Marcus and Sarah found themselves alone. On the museum's rooftop terrace, looking out over the city lights. The same city where their story had begun with gunshots and blood now sparkled before them like a promise of the future. They would build together. "Any regrets about accepting my unconventional proposal?" Sarah asked, leaning against Marcus's chest. "Only one," Marcus replied. "I wish I had told you I loved you sooner." "We had to find our way to it," Sarah said. "Some of the best things in life don't follow traditional timelines." Marcus kissed the top of her head, still marveling at how dramatically his life had changed. The man who had once worried about making rent was now financially secure beyond his dreams. More importantly, the man who had resigned himself to a life of solitude had found a partner who understood and valued him completely. Their love story had begun with a marriage proposal disguised as a business arrangement, but it had evolved into something neither contracts nor circumstances could define. They had saved each other in ways that went far beyond the physical protection. Marcus had provided that day in the parking garage. As they headed home to the house that was now truly theirs, Marcus reflected on the unexpected paths life could take. Sometimes the most important moments came disguised as routine security assignments. Sometimes the greatest love stories began with the most pragmatic arrangements. And sometimes 4 bullets meant for one person could redirect 2 lives toward a happiness neither had dared to imagine. 2 years after their real wedding ceremony, Marcus Rivera stood in the nursery of their Westchester home, carefully assembling a crib while Sarah watched from the doorway, her hand resting on her 6-month pregnant belly. "You know, we could have hired someone to do that," she said with amusement as Marcus wrestled with the instruction manual. "I want to do it myself," Marcus replied, not looking up from the complicated diagram. "Our daughter's first bed should be built by her father." The word father still sent a thrill through him. After everything they had been through, the idea of bringing new life into the world felt like the ultimate victory over those who had tried to destroy them. Sarah moved into the room and settled into the rocking chair they had chosen together. "Have you thought more about the name discussion?" "Elena Rose Rivera Chun," Marcus said immediately. "After my sister and your grandmother. I love it." Sarah's smile was radiant. "Elena will be so honored." The past 2 years had brought changes neither of them had anticipated when they first signed that contract. Sarah had been appointed to the state Supreme Court, making her one of the youngest justices in New York history. The appointment had come with significant media attention, but this time the coverage focused on her legal brilliance rather than the dramatic circumstances of her personal life. Marcus had surprised everyone, including himself, by enrolling in law school. His unique perspective on security and criminal behavior, combined with his natural intelligence, had made him an exceptional student. He was set to graduate in 4 months, with plans to join Sarah's former prosecutor's office as a special consultant on high-risk cases. "Judge Rivera Chun," Marcus said, testing how the title sounded. "I still can't believe they'll be calling you that in 3 months." Sarah's appointment ceremony was scheduled for the spring, just 6 weeks before their baby was due. She had initially considered declining the position due to the timing, but Marcus had convinced her that their daughter should grow up seeing her mother achieve her dreams. The doorbell interrupted their conversation. Marcus looked out the window to see a familiar figure walking up their front path. "It's Agent Morrison," he told Sarah. "I wonder what she wants." Jennifer Morrison had become an unlikely friend over the years since the conspiracy was dismantled. She visited occasionally to check on their well-being, But her expression today seemed more serious than social. Marcus answered the door while Sarah made her way downstairs, moving more slowly now with her growing belly. "Jennifer," Sarah greeted warmly, "this is unexpected. Is everything okay?" Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "Can we sit down? I have some news about the Richardson case that you both need to hear." They gathered in the living room, and Morrison accepted Sarah's offer of coffee before settling into her usual chair by the fireplace. 3 days ago, federal agents in Miami arrested Vincent Castellano, Morrison began. He was living under an assumed identity, running a legitimate construction business. We've been tracking him for 2 years. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Castellano had been the suspected mastermind behind the conspiracy, but he had disappeared before the other arrests were made. "He's agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence," Morrison continued. "What he's told us changes everything we thought we knew about the original threats against Sarah." Marcus leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The assassination attempt in the Perkin garage wasn't ordered by the Richardson conspiracy," Morrison sighed carefully. "It was commissioned by someone else entirely, someone who wanted Sarah dead for different reasons." Sarah's face went pale. "Who? Your ex-husband?" The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah gripped the arm of her chair, and Marcus immediately moved to sit beside her. "That's impossible," Sarah said. "David might have been angry about the divorce, but he would never. Castellano has bank records, recorded phone conversations, and detailed documentation." Morrison interrupted gently. "David paid him $200,000 to have you killed before the Richardson trial. He wanted it to look like it was connected to the case to avoid suspicion." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "Where is he now?" "We arrested him this morning at his office in Buffalo. He's being charged with conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation of murder for hire." Sarah was silent for a long moment, processing the revelation. "He wanted me dead because of the divorce settlement. According to Castellano, David was convinced you were going to destroy his career and reputation. He saw killing you as the only way to protect himself and claim your inheritance." The cruel irony wasn't lost on any of them. If David hadn't ordered the assassination attempt, Marcus never would have been injured. Sarah wouldn't have felt guilty enough to propose their marriage of convenience. They might never have fallen in love. "There's more," Morrison said reluctantly. "David has been under surveillance for illegal activities in Buffalo. Corruption charges, evidence tampering, abuse of power. The murder for hire charge is just the beginning." Sarah stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the garden where they had planned to teach their daughter to play. "All this time, I thought I was being hunted by strangers," she said quietly. "But it was the man I was married to for 10 years who wanted me dead." Marcus joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "He failed, Sarah. You're safe, we're safe, and our daughter will be safe. How did I not see it?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "How did I live with someone for a decade and not know he was capable of murder?" "Because you're not capable of it yourself," Marcus said. "You couldn't imagine that level of evil because it's not in your nature." Morrison cleared her throat. "There will be a trial, obviously. David's attorneys are already claiming he was framed, that Castellano is lying to reduce his own sentence. They'll try to drag Sarah's character through the mud again." "Let them try," Marcus said firmly. "We've weathered worse storms than David Chun." But Sarah was shaking in his arms, the full weight of the betrayal hitting her. The man she had once loved, the man she had trusted with her life and her heart, had literally tried to have her killed. That evening, after Morrison left, Sarah barely spoke during dinner. She pushed food around her plate while Marcus tried to maintain normal conversation, but the revelation had shaken her to her core. "I keep thinking about all the times he held me, kissed me, told me he loved me," Sarah said suddenly. How do you fake those feelings for 10 years while planning to murder someone? Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. David is a sociopath, Sarah. People like that don't experience emotions the way normal people do. Everything was calculated, including his marriage to you. What if I'm a terrible judge of character? What if I can't trust my instincts about people? Your instincts led you to me, Marcus pointed out. You saw something in a wounded security guard that made you believe he was worth building a life with. Your instincts are fine. Sarah squeezed his hand. Promise me something. If you ever want to leave me, if this marriage ever stops working for you, just tell me. Don't pretend everything is fine while plotting behind my back. Sarah, look at me. Marcus waited until she met his eyes. I will never leave you. I will never betray you. I will never hurt you. Those aren't just words, they're the foundation of who I am. The next few months brought a media circus as David's crimes became public. Newspapers and television shows rehashed the entire story, from the original assassination attempt to the marriage of convenience to the latest revelations about David's involvement. Sarah handled the attention with grace, but Marcus could see the toll it was taking on her. She was quieter than usual, more withdrawn, and sometimes he would find her staring into space with a haunted expression. The stress affected her pregnancy as well. Her doctor ordered bed rest after Sarah's blood pressure spiked during a particularly invasive interview request. Marcus took a leave of absence from law school to care for her full-time. I'm sorry, Sarah said one afternoon as Marcus brought her lunch in bed. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend your final semester. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, Marcus replied honestly. My wife and daughter need me. Everything else can wait. Elena visited frequently during this period, often staying overnight to help with Sarah's care. She had graduated from law school herself the previous year and was working at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. But she always made time for family. You know what I think? Elena said one evening as the three of them watched a movie together in the bedroom. I think David accidentally gave us the greatest gift possible when he hired those assassins. Sarah looked puzzled. How do you figure that? If he hadn't tried to have you killed, Marcus wouldn't have thrown himself in front of those bullets. You two never would have met properly, never would have fallen in love, and you wouldn't be having this baby. Evil intentions created something beautiful. It was a perspective Marcus had considered before, but hearing Elena's voice, it seemed to lighten Sarah's mood for the first time in weeks. You're right, Sarah said slowly. David thought he was destroying my life, but instead he gave me the best life I could have imagined. The trial began in early spring, just as Sarah was entering her final month of pregnancy. She testified via video link from their home, her testimony devastating David's defense. She spoke clearly and calmly about their marriage, the divorce proceedings, and her complete shock at learning about his murderous intentions. David's attorneys tried to paint Sarah as vindictive and manipulative, suggesting she had fabricated evidence against him. But Castellano's documentation was too thorough, and David's own recorded phone conversations were too damning to dismiss. Marcus testified in person, describing the assassination attempt and his injuries in clinical detail. But when David's lawyer suggested that Marcus had somehow benefited from the shooting, Marcus's response was swift and sharp. I nearly died protecting an innocent woman from bullets her own husband paid for, Marcus said. If you think being shot 4 times was somehow beneficial to me, I invite you to experience it yourself. The judge sustained the prosecution's objection, but Marcus's point was made. Elena Rose Rivera Chun was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in May, 2 weeks before Sarah's judicial appointment ceremony. She was perfect in every way: 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and her mother's determined chin. Marcus held his daughter for the first time while Sarah slept, marveling at how something so small could make him feel so complete. Elena the younger had been right. David's evil had accidentally created something beautiful. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I have so many things to tell you about how your mommy and I fell in love." The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. David was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, finally paying for his crimes against Sarah and everyone else he had hurt over the years. Sarah's judicial appointment ceremony took place when baby Elena was 3 weeks old. The tiny girl slept peacefully in Marcus's arms as her mother was sworn in as the Honorable Justice Sarah Rivera-Chun. "Do you solemnly swear to administer justice without respect to persons and do equal right to the poor and to the rich?" the Chief Justice asked. "I do," Sarah replied, her voice strong and clear. As Marcus watched his wife take the oath of office while holding their daughter, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 4 bullets had changed the trajectory of multiple lives, creating a love story that no one could have scripted. Agent Morrison attended the ceremony, along with Elena and several of Sarah's former colleagues. Even some of the FBI agents who had protected them during the conspiracy investigation came to show their support. "You know," Morrison said to Marcus during the reception, "in 20 years of law enforcement, I've never seen a case that ended quite like this one. Usually, everyone involved ends up scarred and broken. But you two turned trauma into triumph." "We had help," Marcus replied, nodding toward where Elena was gently rocking the baby. "Family makes all the difference." That evening, as they settled into their new routine as a family of 3, Sarah nursed Elena while Marcus read case briefs aloud. It wasn't romantic in any traditional sense, but it felt perfect to both of them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been working security that day?" Sarah asked. Marcus considered the question. "Sometimes. But I think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are too strong to be accidental. Even if I hadn't needed a marriage of convenience. Especially then. The real Sarah, the one I fell in love with, would have attracted me regardless of the circumstances. The business arrangement just gave us time to discover what was already there." Baby Elena finished nursing and promptly fell asleep in her mother's arms. Sarah passed her to Marcus, who settled the tiny girl against his chest with practiced ease. "She's going to grow up hearing the most unusual love story," Sarah said with amusement. "Mommy proposed to Daddy with a contract after he took bullets. Meant for her." "We'll tell her the whole truth," Marcus said, "including the parts about second chances, about love growing in unexpected places, and about how sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing in your life." Sarah curled up against Marcus's side, careful not to disturb their sleeping daughter. "I love our life," she said softly. "Even with all the drama and danger and unconventional beginnings. Especially because of those things. They made us who we are together." As Marcus held his wife and daughter close, he thought about the contract that had started it all. 2 years, $5 million, and separate bedrooms in exchange for the appearance of a happy marriage. The legal document that had seemed so important at the time was now just a piece of paper in their safe, superseded by wedding vows, birth certificates, and the daily reality of genuine love. 4 bullets had changed everything. They had created a family, forged an unbreakable bond, and proven that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most unlikely circumstances. Outside their bedroom window, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, cases to hear, decisions to make, a baby to raise. But tonight, they were simply a family, complete and content in their love for each other. The man who had once thrown himself between bullets and their target now held that target's heart, their child, and a future neither of them could have imagined. It was a love story born from violence but nurtured by tenderness, a marriage that began as business but evolved into something transcendent. And in the quiet moments before sleep, as baby Elena stirred softly in his arms and Sarah's breathing, Deep in beside him, Marcus Rivera knew that every scar on his body had been worth this perfect moment of peace. 5 years after their daughter Elena was born, Marcus Rivera stood in the kitchen of their Westchester home, packing lunchboxes, while chaos swirled around him. Elena, now a precocious 5-year-old with her mother's determination and her father's protective instincts, was explaining to her baby brother Thomas why he couldn't wear his superhero costume to daycare. "Tommy, you can't wear your cape because it gets stuck in the swing chains," Elena said patiently, helping the 3-year-old into his regular clothes. "Remember what happened last time?" Thomas, a miniature version of Marcus with Sarah's intelligent eyes, pouted but allowed his sister to help him dress. Their morning routine had become a well-choreographed dance of organized chaos that somehow worked despite the constant motion. Sarah entered the kitchen, already dressed in her judicial robes, coffee cup in hand and case files under her arm. At 38, she had grown into her role as one of the state's most respected justices, known for her fair but firm decisions and her ability to cut through legal complexity to find truth. "The Henderson custody hearing is at 10, she said, kissing Marcus quickly. "Then I have the Peterson appeal at 2. I'll probably be late for dinner again. Elena has gymnastics at 4, and Thomas has his pediatrician appointment at 5. Marcus replied, handing her the travel mug he'd prepared with her preferred coffee blend. "I'll handle dinner. You focus on justice." This had become their rhythm over the years. Marcus had graduated from law school and now worked as a special prosecutor, handling cases involving threats against public officials. His unique background and experience made him invaluable in protecting others who faced the kind of dangers Sarah had once endured. But their peaceful domestic routine was about to be shattered by a phone call that would force them to confront ghosts from their past. The call came while Marcus was driving the children to school. Elena was reading a picture book aloud to Thomas in the back seat when Marcus's phone rang through the car's speakers. "Mr. Rivera? This is Warden Patricia Mills from Attica Correctional Facility. I'm calling about David Chun." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, though David's presence had lingered like a shadow over their family's happiness. "What about him?" Marcus asked, pulling into the school parking lot, but not getting out of the car. "He was found dead in his cell this morning, apparent suicide. But there's something you and your wife need to know immediately." Marcus's mind raced. David had been serving life without parole, and the last they'd heard, he had been in solitary confinement for his own protection after several inmates had threatened him. "What is it, Warden?" Before his death, Chun left detailed instructions with his attorney. There are documents, recordings, and what appears to be a confession to crimes beyond what he was convicted for. His lawyer is insisting on meeting with Mrs. Rivera Chun personally. After dropping the children at school, Marcus called Sarah immediately. She listened to his account of the warden's call without interruption, her silence growing heavier with each detail. "I don't want to see anything David left behind," Sarah said finally. "Whatever games he's playing, even from the grave, I won't participate. Sarah, what if it's important? What if there are other victims who deserve justice? Then the authorities can handle it without involving me." Her voice was sharp with old pain. "I won't let that man reach out from his grave to poison our lives again." But the decision was taken out of their hands when David's attorney, a thin man named Harold Brennan, appeared at Marcus's office that afternoon carrying a sealed briefcase and wearing the expression of someone bearing terrible news. "Mr. Rivera, I apologize for the intrusion, but my client's final instructions were very specific. These documents can only be turned over to you and Justice Rivera Chun personally." Marcus studied Brennan's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What kind of documents? Confessions to additional crimes, including the murders of 3 other people over the past 15 years. Names, dates, methods, and locations of evidence. Brennan set the briefcase on Marcus's desk. "There's also a personal letter addressed to your wife." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders. If David had killed other people, their families deserved to know the truth. But exposing Sarah to more of David's manipulation felt like a betrayal of the peace they had built together. That evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus and Sarah sat at their kitchen table staring at the unopened briefcase. Neither had touched it since Marcus brought it home. "I keep thinking about those other families," Sarah said quietly. "If David killed 3 more people, they've been living without answers all these years. And I keep thinking about protecting you and our children from whatever poison he's left behind." Marcus replied. Sarah reached across the table and opened the briefcase with steady hands. Inside were manila folders, a digital recorder, and a sealed envelope with her name written in David's familiar handwriting. The first folder contained photographs and documents related to the 2018 death of Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morrison Agent, Morrison's younger sister, who had been found dead in what was ruled a car accident. David's notes suggested he had tampered with her brakes after she began investigating corruption in his department. The second folder detailed the 2020 drowning of Police Sergeant Michael Torres, who had discovered David's involvement in evidence tampering. David's confession included the location of Torres's personal belongings, which he had kept as trophies. The third folder was the most disturbing. It contained evidence that David had murdered his first wife, Catherine, in 2008, 2 years before he met Sarah. Catherine's death had been ruled a suicide, but David's notes revealed he had forced her to take an overdose of sleeping pills after she threatened to expose his illegal activities. "My God," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking as she closed the folders. "He was a serial killer. I was married to a serial killer." Marcus moved around the table to hold her, but she was rigid with shock and revulsion. "How many times did he hold me and think about killing me?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "How many nights did I sleep next to a murderer?" "Sarah, you couldn't have known. But I should have seen something, some sign, some hint of what he really was." Tears started falling down her cheeks. "Catherine died because of him, and I never questioned the story about her suicide. I even felt sorry for him." Marcus held her while she cried, his own mind reeling from the revelations. David's evil had been far more extensive than anyone had imagined, and Sarah had been living with a monster without knowing it. The personal letter remained unopened on the table, its presence like a venomous snake coiled and waiting to strike. "I don't want to read it," Sarah said, looking at the envelope with fear and disgust. "Then don't. We'll turn everything over to the authorities and let them handle it." But Sarah shook her head. "If there are more victims, more families who need closure, I have to know what he wrote. I have to see if there's anything that could help them." With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded the single page inside. David's final message was brief, but calculated to cause maximum psychological damage. "Sarah, by the time you read this, I'll be beyond your reach, but my last gift to you will keep giving for years to come. Every time you look in the mirror, you'll wonder what signs you missed. Every time you kiss your husband goodnight, you'll remember that you once kissed a killer without knowing it. I chose you because you were naive enough to believe in love and justice. I stayed married to you because your reputation enhanced my career. And when you became inconvenient, I tried to have you killed because you meant nothing to me. You think you won because you found love with your bodyguard, but you'll never be able to trust your judgment about people again. How can you be sure Marcus isn't hiding secrets too? How can you be certain anyone is who they claim to be? Sleep well, Sarah. I'll be in your dreams." David, the letter fell from Sarah's numb fingers, and Marcus quickly snatched it up to read David's final act of cruelty. Rage filled him as he processed each calculated word designed to destroy Sarah's peace of mind. "He's still trying to win," Marcus said, crumpling the letter. "Even in death, He's trying to make you afraid." Sarah sat in stunned silence for several minutes. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "What if he's right? What if I'm terrible at reading people? What if I can't trust my own judgment? Sarah, look at me." Marcus knelt beside her chair and took her hands. David was a psychopath who spent years perfecting the art of deception. Even trained professionals are fooled by people like him. The fact that he deceived you doesn't mean you're naive. It means he was a skilled predator. But what if I'm wrong about other people? What if I'm wrong about you? Marcus felt his heart break at the fear in her voice. David's poison was already working, making Sarah doubt the foundation of their marriage. "Then judge me by my actions." "Over the past 7 years," Marcus said gently. "Judge me by the way I've loved you and our children every single day. Judge me by the fact that I've never given you a reason to doubt me." Over the following weeks, the investigation into David's additional crimes dominated the news. The remains of Sergeant Torres were found exactly where David's confession indicated, and new evidence in Catherine Chen's death led to the case being reclassified as murder. Rachel Morrison's family finally had answers about their daughter's death, and Agent Morrison personally thanked Sarah for having the courage to reveal David's final confessions. "My sister can finally rest in peace," Jennifer Morrison said during a private meeting at Sarah's courthouse office. "I know this wasn't easy for you." "Those families deserve the truth," Sarah replied, though Marcus could see the toll the revelations had taken on her. She had lost weight, wasn't sleeping well, and seemed to startle at unexpected sounds. The media attention was intense, but different from previous coverage of their story. This time, Sarah was portrayed as another of David's victims, someone who had escaped his murderous intentions only through incredible luck and Marcus's heroic intervention. But the support from friends, colleagues, and the public didn't ease Sarah's internal struggle. She had begun questioning everything about her past, analyzing every interaction with David for signs she should have noticed. "I've been thinking about the night he proposed to me," Sarah said one evening as they sat in their bedroom. "He seemed so romantic, so genuine. But now I wonder if he was already planning Catherine's murder." "Sarah, you have to stop torturing yourself with these thoughts." "How can I? I shared a bed with a serial killer for 10 years. I trusted him with my life, and he was planning to take it." Sarah's voice cracked. "What does that say about my judgment?" Marcus had watched David's final manipulation slowly poison his wife's confidence and happiness. The woman who had once been fearless in court now second-guessed every decision, questioned every relationship, and seemed to view the world through a lens of suspicion and doubt. Their children had noticed the change too. Elena, now 6, had asked Marcus why Mommy seemed sad all the time. Thomas, still too young to understand, simply clung more tightly to his mother when she held him, as if sensing her distress. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Reeves, a forensic psychologist who had testified in David's original trial, requested a meeting with Sarah to discuss the psychological profile she had developed of David over the years. "Justice Rivera Chun, I've studied your ex-husband's case extensively, and I want you to understand something crucial about psychopaths like David," Dr. Reeves said during their meeting. "They are extraordinarily skilled at mimicking normal human emotions and relationships. They study their victims carefully and become exactly what those victims want them to be." Sarah listened intently as Dr. Reeves continued. "David didn't fool you because you're naive or because you have poor judgment. He fooled you because he was a master manipulator who had decades of practice deceiving people. The fact that you eventually saw through him enough to leave him actually demonstrates exceptional insight. But I never suspected he was capable of murder. Most people who live with psychopaths don't. These individuals compartmentalize their lives so effectively that their families often have no idea about their criminal activities." Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Sarah, you need to understand that David's ability to deceive you says nothing about your character or judgment. It says everything about his pathology. The conversation with Dr. Reeves marked a turning point in Sarah's recovery. She began to see David's deceptions not as her failure, but as his sickness. She started sleeping better, eating more, and slowly returning to her confident self. But the most significant healing came through her work. Sarah threw herself into cases involving domestic violence and psychological abuse, using her experience to help other victims find justice. Her rulings became known for their compassion toward abuse survivors and their insight into the dynamics of manipulative relationships. "You're saving people," Marcus told her after she delivered a particularly moving verdict in a stalking case. "You're turning David's evil into something that protects others." "It feels like the only way to make sense of it all," Sarah replied. "If my experience can help even one person recognize the signs of abuse, then maybe some good came from those terrible years." On the 5th anniversary of David's death, Sarah and Marcus visited the graves of his victims, Catherine, Rachel, and Sergeant Torres. They left flowers and stood in silence, paying respects to the people whose murders had gone undetected for years. "I think about them sometimes," Sarah said as they walked back to their car. "About the lives they might have lived if David hadn't killed them. And I think about the life we almost didn't have because of him," Marcus replied. "But we survived, Sarah. We not only survived, we built something beautiful despite everything he tried to destroy." That evening, as they tucked their children into bed, Alina asked a question that surprised both parents. "Mommy, why do you and Daddy always tell us we're safe?" Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. They had indeed made it a habit to reassure their children of their safety, perhaps overcompensating for their own experiences with danger. "Because we want you to know that we'll always protect you," Sarah answered carefully. "But you can't protect us from everything," Alina said with 6-year-old wisdom. "Bad things happen sometimes. That's why you and Daddy met, right? Because bad things happened, but you made them into good things." Marcus marveled at his daughter's insight. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. Sometimes bad things lead to wonderful things we never could have imagined." As they kissed the children goodnight and turned off the lights, Sarah took Marcus's hand in the hallway. "She's right, you know," Sarah said softly. "We did make something beautiful from something terrible. David tried to destroy me, but instead, he led me to you and to this life we've built together. No regrets about the unconventional beginning." Sarah smiled, the first genuinely peaceful smile Marcus had seen from her in months. "None at all. Every bullet scar on your body, every day of that strange marriage arrangement, every moment of danger we faced, it all led to this. To Elena and Thomas, to your work saving other people, to my ability to help abuse survivors find justice." Standing in the hallway of their home, surrounded by the quiet sounds of their sleeping children, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 7 years ago, he had been a bodyguard living paycheck to paycheck. Now he was a prosecutor, a husband, a father, and a man who had found his purpose in protecting others. 4 bullets changed everything," he said quietly. "No," Sarah corrected, kissing him softly. "Love changed everything. The bullets just brought us together long enough to discover it." 10 years had passed since Marcus Rivera first threw himself between 4 bullets and their intended target. Now at 38, he stood at the podium of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Quantico, addressing a room full of FBI agents, Secret Service personnel, and local law enforcement. Officers who had come to hear him speak about threat assessment and protection protocols. The split-second decision to act can change more lives than just the ones you're trying to save, Marcus said, clicking to the next slide in his presentation. But that decision must be rooted in training, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life. The audience was captivated, not just by his expertise, but by the story that had brought him to this moment. Marcus had become something of a legend in protection circles, the bodyguard whose heroic action had not only saved a life but had revolutionized how personal security was approached in high-threat situations. After his presentation, Marcus was approached by a young agent named Lisa Park, whose earnest expression reminded him of his younger self. "Mr. Rivera, I've read every case study about your response to the assassination attempt. What I don't understand is how you made that tactical decision so quickly. Most protection protocols would have you creating distance and calling for backup." Marcus smiled at the question he'd been asked hundreds of times over the years. "Agent Park, all the protocols in the world don't matter if your principal dies while you're following procedure. Sometimes, the only choice is to put your body between the threat and the person you're sworn to protect. Even knowing it could cost you your life, especially knowing that. The moment you hesitate because you're afraid for yourself, you've failed in your fundamental duty." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a text from Sarah. "Watching your live stream with the kids. Elena says you look like a superhero up there. Thomas wants to know if you're coming home for his birthday party tomorrow." Marcus showed the message to Agent Park. "This is why I do what I do now, training others instead of taking bullets myself. My wife and children need me to come home safe every night." That evening, Marcus sat in his hotel room, preparing for the flight back to New York, reflecting on how dramatically his life had evolved. His speaking engagements took him around the country several times a year, sharing his experience with law enforcement agencies and private security firms. He had also co-authored a book with Agent Morrison about protective intelligence and threat assessment that had become required reading at the FBI Academy, but his most important work remained in New York, where he served as the state's special prosecutor for crimes against public officials. His unique background and personal experience with assassination attempts made him extraordinarily effective at prosecuting cases involving threats against judges, prosecutors, and elected officials. The next afternoon, Marcus arrived home to find their backyard transformed into a pirate-themed wonderland for Thomas's 8th birthday party. 8-year-old Thomas, now tall for his age with his father's athletic build and his mother's sharp wit, was directing his friends in an elaborate treasure hunt while 10-year-old Elena, who had inherited both parents' leadership qualities, supervised the operation with remarkable efficiency. "Daddy!" Thomas launched himself into Marcus's arms with the force of a small missile. "You're just in time for the sword fight." Sarah emerged from the kitchen, carrying an elaborate pirate ship birthday cake, wearing a sundress and a smile that still made Marcus's heart skip beats even after all these years. At 43, she had grown even more beautiful, her confidence and wisdom evident in every gesture. "How was the training session?" she asked, kissing him while expertly balancing the cake. "Productive. The new threat assessment protocols are being implemented nationwide. We might actually prevent some assassination attempts before they happen." "My hero," Sarah said with genuine pride. "Still saving lives, just on a larger scale now." The party was a joyous chaos of children playing games, parents socializing, and Thomas reveling in being the center of attention. Marcus found himself watching Sarah interact with their guest neighbors, fellow parents, and family friends who had become part of their extended community over the years. "She's remarkable, isn't she?" Marcus turned to find Elena, the original Elena, his sister, approaching, with her own 2-year-old son, Marcus Jr., perched on her hip. At 32, Elena had become a successful immigration attorney and had married a wonderful man named James 3 years earlier. "She really is," Marcus agreed, watching Sarah organize a game of pirate ship for the children. "I still can't believe she chose me." "Oh, please," Elena rolled her eyes. "Marcus, you literally took bullets for her. You built a security empire, became a prosecutor, and co-authored a best-selling book. You're not exactly a slouch yourself. It was true." The Rivera Security Consulting firm that Marcus had founded 5 years earlier now employed over 200 people, and provided protection services for high-profile clients across the country. His personal story had opened doors, but his expertise and results had built the business into something far beyond what he had ever imagined possible. "Uncle Marcus, come help us find the treasure," Thomas called from across the yard, waving a toy sword enthusiastically. The treasure hunt led the children around the property, with clues that Marcus and Sarah had crafted to challenge their young minds while keeping them entertained. The final clue led to a small chest buried in the garden, filled with candy, small toys, and personalized certificates declaring each child an honorary member of Captain Thomas's crew. As the party wound down and guests began leaving, Marcus helped clean up while Sarah put Thomas down for what she optimistically called a quiet time, but which they both knew would be anything but quiet given his birthday excitement. "Elena, can you help Daddy with the dishes?" Sarah called as she headed upstairs with Thomas. 10-year-old. Elena approached Marcus with an expression far too serious for her age. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "Some kids at school have been asking me about the stories they find online about you and Mommy, about how you got hurt saving her, and about her first husband being a bad man." Elena's voice was careful, as if she was trying not to upset him. "They want to know if it's all true." Marcus dried his hands and knelt down to Elena's eye level. This was a conversation he and Sarah had been preparing for as their children grew older and became more aware of their family's unusual history. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that you're the bravest person I know, and that Mommy is the smartest person I know, and that sometimes bad things happen to good people, but good people can make something beautiful from bad things." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's exactly right, Elena. What else would you like to know?" Elena considered this seriously. "Were you scared when you got shot?" "Yes, I was scared. But I was more scared of what would happen to your mother if I didn't protect her." "And that's when you fell in love?" "Not right away. Love grew slowly as we got to know each other and realized we wanted to build a life together. The shooting brought us together, but love kept us together." Elena nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. "Tommy asked me if we have a different dad than other kids because of all the stories. I told him we have the best dad, and that's what matters." That evening, after both children were finally asleep and the house was restored to order, Marcus and Sarah sat on their back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. It had become their favorite time of day, a quiet moment to reconnect after the busy demands of work and family. "Elena asked about our history today," Marcus said, telling Sarah about their conversation during cleanup. "I've noticed her classmates asking more questions lately. I think it's time we had a more complete family discussion about everything that happened." Marcus agreed. Their children were old enough to understand an age-appropriate version of their story, and it was better that they heard it from their parents rather than piecing it together from internet searches and playground gossip. "I've been thinking about something else," Sarah said, taking Marcus's hand. "Agent Morrison called today. She's retiring next month, and the FBI wants to hold a ceremony honoring everyone involved in the Richardson case investigation. They want us to attend. How do you feel about that?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the trees. "Proud, I think. Grateful that we survived it all and were able to help bring justice to so many victims. But also amazed at how far we've all come." The ceremony 2 weeks later was held at FBI headquarters in New York. Agent Morrison, now graying but still sharp and formidable, was presented with the Bureau's highest civilian honor for her work on the Richardson case and the subsequent investigation into David's crimes. Marcus and Sarah were recognized as well, not just for their roles in the original case, but for their ongoing work in law enforcement and victim advocacy. Sarah had established a foundation that provided legal support for abuse survivors, While Marcus's training programs had been credited with preventing multiple assassination attempts across the country, during the reception afterward, they were approached by Rachel Morrison's parents, whom they had met briefly during the investigation into their daughter's murder. "We never got to properly thank you," Rachel's mother said to Sarah. "If you hadn't been brave enough to reveal David's confession, we never would have known what really happened to our daughter. Rachel would have been so proud of what you've both accomplished," her father added. "She always believed that good could come from even the darkest situations." These moments, connecting with families who had found closure through their actions, reminded Marcus why their unusual love story had become something larger than just their personal happiness. They had transformed their trauma into a mission to protect others, their marriage into a partnership that served justice. On the drive home from the ceremony, Alina asked the question that had been building toward for months. "Will you tell us the whole story now? The real story of how you and Mommy met and fell in love?" Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded. Their children were ready for the truth. That evening, after Thomas was asleep, they sat with Elena in the living room and told her everything. The assassination attempt, Marcus's injuries, the marriage contract, their growing feelings for each other, David's betrayal and crimes, and how they had built their family and careers from the foundation of their unlikely beginning. Elena listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions and processing each revelation with maturity beyond her years. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. "So you were like superheroes," she said finally. "You saved each other, and then you saved other people too." "We're not superheroes, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "We're just people who decided to use our experiences to help others. But isn't that what superheroes do? Use their powers to protect people who can't protect themselves?" Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances, struck by their daughter's insight. In a way, their experiences had given them unique powers. Marcus's understanding of protection and threat assessment, Sarah's insight into abuse and manipulation, and their combined ability to help others navigate dangerous situations. "I guess when you put it that way, maybe we are a little bit like superheroes," Marcus said with a smile. "Does this mean Thomas and I have superpowers too?" "You have the power to be kind, to stand up for people who need help, and to make the world a little bit better just by being in it," Sarah said. "Those might be the most important superpowers of all." As they tucked Elena into bed that night, she hugged them both extra tightly. "I'm glad Daddy got shot," she said factly. Marcus and Sarah both started to object, but Elena continued before they could speak. "I mean, I'm sad that it hurt, and that it was scary. But if it didn't happen, I wouldn't exist, and Thomas wouldn't exist, and you wouldn't have saved all those other people. Sometimes bad things have to happen, so good things can happen later." Later, as Marcus and Sarah prepared for bed, they reflected on their daughter's wisdom. "She's right, you know," Sarah said as she brushed her hair. "If David hadn't tried to have me killed, if you hadn't been there to stop it, none of this would exist. Our children, our work, our ability to help other families find justice and healing." Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind, looking at their reflection in the bathroom mirror. They had both changed dramatically over the years. Marcus bore the physical scars of his injuries, but had grown into his role as a protector and leader, while Sarah had transformed her trauma into wisdom and strength that she used to help others. "No regrets?" he asked, the same question he had posed years earlier. "Only one," Sarah said, turning in his arms. "I regret that it took me so long to tell you I loved you. We wasted months pretending it was just business when it was already so much more. We weren't ready for the truth earlier. We had to grow into it." "Promise me something," Sarah said, echoing a conversation they'd had years before. "Promise me we'll never stop being grateful for this life we built together. I promise. Even when the kids are teenagers and hate us, even when we're old and gray and arguing about medication schedules, I'll still be grateful that 4 bullets brought us together. And I promise to never stop being amazed that a man I hired to protect me ended up saving my soul. The next morning brought the familiar chaos of getting children ready for school, packing lunches, finding missing homework, and negotiating the daily challenges of family life. But beneath the ordinary surface of their routine, Marcus and Sarah carried the knowledge of how extraordinary their journey had been. As Marcus drove to his office and Sarah headed to the courthouse, they passed the billboard advertising Marcus's book 4 Bullets, a love story born from violence, which had become a bestseller and was being adapted into a documentary about resilience and hope. At his office, Marcus reviewed case files involving new threats against public officials, each case a reminder of why his work mattered. His secretary informed him that 3 more law enforcement agencies had requested his training program, and a prosecutor in California had called seeking advice on a case involving stalking of a female judge. Meanwhile, Sarah presided over a domestic violence case where her personal experience with manipulation and psychological abuse allowed her to see through the defendant's attempts to gaslight his victim. Her ruling not only protected the victim, but set a legal precedent that would help other survivors seek justice. That evening, the family gathered for dinner as they did every night when schedules permitted. Thomas regaled them with stories from school while Elena helped serve the meal with increasing independence. The conversation was ordinary and precious: homework assignments, weekend plans, Elena's upcoming piano recital, Thomas's little league game. "Daddy, will you come to my game on Saturday?" Thomas asked. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Marcus promised. "Mommy, can you help me practice my piano piece tonight?" Elena requested. "After dinner, we'll work on it together," Sarah assured her. These simple family moments had become Marcus's greatest treasures. The man who had once lived paycheck to paycheck now had financial security beyond his dreams. But the real wealth was sitting around this dinner table. Later, as they cleaned up from dinner, Sarah's phone rang with a call from a women's shelter in Albany. A prosecutor there was being stalked by the defendant in a high-profile abuse case, and they needed Marcus's security expertise and Sarah's legal guidance. "We'll drive up tomorrow," Sarah told the caller. "This can't wait." Marcus nodded his agreement. They had built their careers around helping others navigate the kind of dangers they had once faced themselves. It wasn't just their job, it was their calling. As they put the children to bed that night, Marcus reflected on how their story had evolved from a tale of survival into a legacy of service. The 4 bullets that had nearly ended Sarah's life had instead created a ripple effect that had protected countless others. Standing in the doorway watching Thomas sleep, Marcus remembered the scared young man he had been 10 years ago, worried about paying rent and keeping his sister in school. That person could never have imagined the life he now lived, married to an extraordinary woman, father to 2 remarkable children, leader of a successful business, and guardian of those who needed protection. Sarah joined him in the doorway, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching their son's peaceful face in the dim glow of his nightlight. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "For what?" "For not hesitating. For throwing yourself between me and those bullets without thinking about the cost. For changing the entire trajectory of my life with one moment of selfless courage. Thank you for seeing something in a wounded bodyguard worth building a life with. For taking a chance on a marriage that started as a business arrangement. For trusting me with your heart and your children's future." They moved to Elena's room, where their daughter slept surrounded by books and stuffed animals, her face peaceful in sleep. She looked so much like Sarah, but had Marcus's determined jaw and protective instincts. "She's going to change the world," Sarah said softly. "They both are. They're growing up knowing that love can triumph over evil, that good people can overcome terrible circumstances, and that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings." As they finally headed to their own bedroom, Marcus thought about the strange mathematics of their love story. 4 bullets, 2 lives, 1 split-second decision, and countless ripple effects that were still spreading outward, touching lives they would never know about. Their bedroom walls were decorated with photos from their journey together, their hospital wedding, their real ceremony, the children's births, family vacations, professional achievements, and quiet moments of happiness. Each picture told part of their story, but the complete narrative was written in the life they had built together. "Marcus," Sarah said as they settled into bed, "do you ever wonder what message our story sends to people?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what lesson are people supposed to take from everything that happened to us? That you should marry your bodyguard? That business arrangements can become real love? That getting shot can lead to happiness?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think our story tells people that love can grow in the most unexpected places, that courage in dark moments can create light for others, and that the worst things that happen to us don't have to define our future. And that sometimes," Sarah added, "the person who's meant to protect you ends up being the person you're meant to love." As they turned off the lights and settled into sleep, Marcus's last thought was about the family sleeping safely down the hall, the work that awaited them tomorrow, and the continuing story they were writing together. 4 bullets had changed everything, but love had made it beautiful dot in the darkness. Sarah's hand found his, and Marcus smiled at how right it felt still, after all these years, exactly where it belonged. Their unlikely beginning had become an extraordinary life, proof that sometimes the most devastating moments can become the foundation for the greatest happiness. Their story would continue tomorrow, and the day after that, and for all the years to come. But tonight, they were simply a family at peace, safe in the love they had built from the ashes of violence and transformed into something larger than themselves. A legacy of protection, justice, and the unshakable belief that good can triumph over evil. The man who had blocked 4 bullets meant for a stranger had found his purpose, his partner, and his place in the world. And somewhere in the quiet of their sleeping house, love continued to grow, just as it had from the very first day. Sarah Chun walked into Marcus Rivera's hospital room and began the conversation that would change everything. "Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."